Vimlendu Jha, the government is saying, look, we brought in several measures, particularly in the last 24 hours. We made it compulsory. If you want to purchase petrol at a station, you've got to have your pollution certificates in place. We are putting in place 50% work from home norms. We are controlling vehicles that are emitting polluting air. They are saying we are making efforts. Do you believe it's too little, too late, that there isn't enough understandings yet of the gravity of this issue?
So Rajdeep, these are GRAP measures, these are reactive measures, these are band-aid measures, these are only measures which actually can qualify as tokenism. The kind of issue that we're talking about, one, it is tokenism, the other is it's very, very Delhi-centric. One thing that we need to understand, that air pollution crisis is a pan-India crisis and not just a Delhi-centric crisis. So, three problems that we actually have with regard to air pollution is that we've kept it Delhi-centric largely, we have believed in denial of data and denial of pollution to a large extent, and anything in the name of governance, we only hide behind GRAP in that sense. So your story right now, in terms of violations that we were talking about, are violations of restrictions. That still doesn't give us a picture as a country in terms of how are we actually in the long term combating air pollution per se. And that's the reason why the biggest frustration and disappointment is that the opportunity that we have right now, or India has, or India's parliament has, to discuss this issue and perhaps look at long-term and medium-term measures, because we all know that by just shutting down construction for a night or some BS3, BS4, BS6 measures is not going to solve the problem. We will have to look at that big-ticket issues of overall.
In fact, our story is showing construction is continuing. Vimlendu, sorry to intervene. Our story is showing construction is still continuing in the heart of the capital.
Absolutely, Rajdeep. So imagine whatever little that the government claims that it's actually pretending to do, even that is being violated. So imagine GRAP is not governance, GRAP is reactive. GRAP, anyway, this entire measure, if everything was done 100%, still do you think the air quality index would have come down to 100 given the situation that we have? But at least from the intent point of view, I would say that all of this is headline management, perception management rather than pollution management, and still is very, very Delhi-centric. Of course, these measures are only applied in Delhi. What about Lucknow? Do we have these restrictions in Lucknow? And that's the reason why that discussion in the parliament is extremely important, because we, at least for the next 5 years, we need Beijing-like plan, a London-like plan to really address this issue long term, because we can't do season to season, month to month, one GRAP to another GRAP to another GRAP. That's because this season that's exactly what we've done. Like imagine day before yesterday there was GRAP 4 and suddenly the wind speed increased and we came back to GRAP 3, and suddenly today there's more smog and we perhaps will be in GRAP 4 plus. Is that called governance? And that's the most unfortunate part, that we have been reactive, we have been tentative, we have been very impulsive, we have only been Delhi-centric, and we've only lived in denial. So largely, if you look at the first 15 days of this pollution season, so to say, of course pollution season, unfortunately we only call October to January as pollution season. Reality is that India's air, and more so Delhi's air, remains in poor category through the year. But initially, for the first 15 days, Delhi government as well as the central government completely denied that this is a problem. In fact, till yesterday the environment minister kept saying of India and also of Delhi that we are doing better. In fact, environment minister said that this year we haven't touched 450 plus, and then on 15th of December we actually were 800 plus in that sense. So, I feel very, very disappointed that it's a lost opportunity if the parliament tomorrow doesn't gear up. This entire and GRAM and whatever other issues can wait. This is the most pressing issue for India.
The fact is, of course, I am not sure whether a parliament discussion will change anything. It's not about discussion, it's also about political will, about actually finding solutions. But Professor Gupta, to get your initial comments, do you believe that governments are treating this as a band-aid issue, to use Vimlendu Jha's words, that it needs surgery, you need major transformation in the way public transport is prioritized, in the way in which polluting industries are taken outside the big cities? You're not going to, Band-Aid is not going to work anymore. Do you believe that's going to change in the near future, or do you believe there's a chalta hai attitude year after year? The problem is there. No one wants to resolve it. Is it an issue of a lack of political will, lack of citizen awareness? Where is the problem?
I think it's a problem of lack of political will, but maybe the lack of political will is also embedded in a lack of understanding that if you really manage your system properly, you get clean air, clean water, your soil regenerates itself, your environment functions, your bees multiply, and therefore you have enough food. So the entire ecosystem, understanding how we need to nurture our ecosystem so that it nurtures us back is more important than trying to tell everybody to buy an air purifier or a water purifier, which is the current situation in Delhi, and which is what I have been watching over the last 30 years in India as well. So what I've seen is that standards for air pollution are ignored. And why are we reaching a point that it is to reach an emergency? Why can't we just reach the standards that are required? Now, this requires us to think differently. I believe that the cost of inaction on air pollution and water pollution is much greater than the cost of action. The question is who is going to pay? And of course, it has to be those who benefit the most. Unfortunately, in your video, you show us people who are on the streets. They will suffer the most from the air pollution, but they're also the small guy. We really need to understand how the entire structure is organized, how our economy is planned, how the way in which we are promoting private transport as opposed to public transport and shared transport. So you need a systemic approach. And this, if you understand the systemic approach, you will realize that the cost of action is much less than the cost of inaction. I mean, just to go to the cost of inaction, you not only have people who are falling sick.
Let me come for a moment to specific solutions, and because I think we need to find the solutions. I just want to put, for example, first an audit that we did of what has happened over the last 10 years in terms of steps to fight pollution. Phasing out of 15-year-old petrol and 10-year-old diesel vehicles has been mostly enforced. Bharat State 6 emission norms introduced in 2020, mostly enforced. Use of electrical vehicles has been incentivized, but the record is very spotty. CNG autos and buses enforced, but remember, this came through a law, through the courts, not through political will. The odd-even scheme, rationing scheme, was attempted by the Aam Aadmi Party government first in Delhi. It's been tried, but it's not succeeded to the extent that one might have hoped. Many believe that it was again an ad hoc solution. Subsidies for machinery, biodecomposers to curb stubble burning, in practice yet to take off. But the truth of the matter is stubble burning accounts for a very small percentage of pollution. Very easy then to blame the farmers alone. Mobile water sprinklers and anti-smoke guns to manage dust. It's in practice, but no one knows whether it's really working. Remember, the Chief Minister of Delhi went to the extent of suggesting AQI is a bit like a thermometer. I think she needs a little bit more information and education in that matter. Smog towers at multiple locations. Frankly, it's been a complete flop. Cloud seeding didn't take off again. Mechanical road sweeping is in practice. Vimlendu Jha, I just listed this as an audit because the governments will argue they've been attempting various measures. They haven't quite taken off. Do you believe there is a solution out there, or there are no easy solutions given the scale of the problem?
So, Rajdeep, there are easy solutions and there are systemic solutions. But before that, let me comment on the long list that you actually gave in terms of what the government attempted to do or has already done. Reality is that if all these things were proportionate to the kind of crisis that we are actually facing, then we would not be in this crisis that we are facing. So therefore, these things are either wrong solutions or are not adequate solutions in that sense. And the reason why I say that half of them are voodoo solutions or wrong solutions, because they were not supposed to work. As in a smog tower, power was not supposed to work because at best it can only clean 200 square meters of the area, and it's a very, very expensive affair. Similarly, cloud seeding has not worked anywhere in this world except for drought purposes than for clean air, and therefore it is anyway not supposed to work. Similarly, if you look at the allocation of budget in terms of a clean air program, the budget of India has been 20,000 crores for 6 years for 130 cities, which comes to around 25 crore per city per year, which is peanuts compared to many other places in the world that have actually been able to clean the air. So what Yogeeta ji was actually talking about, and what you said, that is lack of political will, that's the first thing. Now in terms of solution, what the government can achieve in 1 week marginally, and therefore perhaps will have an impact very, very soon. The 15 coal thermal power plants that we actually have in the immediate periphery of Delhi. Of course, this solution is Delhi-centric because Delhi NCR, of course, has worse pollution than many other parts in that sense. Why can't we actually follow the emission norms, the sulfur dioxide emission norms of these thermal power plants to begin with in Delhi NCR and throughout the year? So therefore, I'm not saying that, make those coal thermal power plants overnight into gas-run coal thermal power plants, but their emission norms need to be followed. Similarly, public transport infrastructure, not just of Delhi, but of entire Delhi NCR region, and also of many of those urban cities, and why not of Lucknow, of Kolkata, of all other areas, and that will need investment. And as Joyeeta said, that the World Bank says that loss of GDP because of air pollution is almost 1.5% to 3%. Imagine next year onwards, if 3% of India's GDP is actually allocated to air pollution mitigation, and will not need extra money to really solve this. Similarly, the emission standards in terms of the polluting industries that we're talking about, or for that matter, construction demolition norms. And we need to understand one thing: governance of air quality cannot be top down. We cannot have babus and secretaries and CAQMs. We need Central Pollution Control Board and Delhi and State Pollution Control Boards to be empowered, both in terms of resource, in terms of money, and in terms of teeth. And reality is that 50% of the vacancy exists in Central Pollution Control Board. So you need adequate money, you need teeth, you need bottom strong manpower, you need great public transport, which you can actually achieve in 3 years' time. You need to shut down these polluting industries and coal thermal power plants, and make sure, and at the same time, as Yogeeta said, that imagine it has to be an ecosystem approach. Do you think the destruction of Aravali's affect Delhi's air? Yes, destruction, design of Aravali that we are actually talking about will affect Delhi's air and Delhi's water. Similarly, the ridge management, similarly many other issues will have to be looked at it together. And of course the stubble burning. So I think that unless we look at it from an interministerial, interdepartmental. So finance, health, agriculture,
you need a comprehensive
transport,
plan.
energy, environment,
It cannot work in silos. I take your point. It cannot work in silos. Truth of the matter is, as the question in Parliament showed, there have been very few meetings that have taken place actually that have involved all the stakeholders. And unless that happens, nothing is going to change. I want a final word from you there, Professor Gupta. We've seen countries like China achieve it. A friend of mine just came back from Shanghai and said the AQI there was 30 or 40, and you compare it with India, where it's in some parts over 400, 500. What did Beijing and China do that we can? Is there something we can do, at least in the short term, that can actually substantially reduce the problem?
In the short term, I'm not entirely sure you can do it without pain somewhere. But in fact, some of these measures have already been mentioned by Vimlendu. The most important thing for me is that we should now at least start with all the steps for the long-term improvement, because it's not just a problem in the winter months. It's all through the year, and it continues. And the number of people who are falling sick in India, especially the people who live in the slums, who don't have houses, but also the children who are playing outside, elderly people who go for walks or jogs, everybody is suffering. And it is a regional problem. It's not a Delhi problem. I'd like to reconfirm that. It's also a matter of national strategy. What do we prioritize? Do we prioritize environmental standards? Do we prioritize trying to meet them and making sure that the permits that are allocated to different actors in the society add up to the ambient quality standard, or are we just giving permits without thinking about the relationship with the ambient quality standard? And this is not just about air, it's also about the way we deal with water, it's about the way we deal with the environment. So we do need to sit down together and really get this story right. And in the whole process, we must make sure it's not the poorest people who are paying the bill. It's not the children who are paying the bill. It's not the senior citizens. It must be the broadest shoulders in society. And because political will not happen overnight, it is really important for children, for schools, for universities to make demands for this change. You need a social movement to put the pressure. You need the journalists like you to discuss this and demand from government that they respond, and better sooner than later. And by the way, if you are going to take a systemic approach, take climate change on board, because all the solutions on water that you're thinking about will not work if we have climate change getting worse and worse, as we can see already. I'd like to say that a healthy
the fact
air,
at the
healthy
end
people.
of the matter is, I can only say this here, I can only say that year after year we debate it. We often make the mistake perhaps of debating it only in pollution season. But the problem can't be resolved by journalists. The problem has to be resolved by those in power. Are you willing to prioritize the environment? Look at the deforestation that's going on in state after state. Travel to Uttarakhand, travel to Himachal. Look at the manner in which the coastlines of this country are being destroyed. Travel to Goa. Look at the larger environmental crisis that's going to build upon us. It may not be an issue that will win or lose you an election like dharma or jati does, like religion or caste does, but for God's sake, for the sake of our children, look at environment, look at pollution as the major issues of our time.